playing ar Uniwaves
ac ar Express Byw. Dyma
Express Radio.
Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change on Air. My name is Lily Mott, and I'm so excited to introduce my guest who is here in the Express radio station with me today. My guest today is Saadia, and she is an inspirational speaker, podcaster, and workshop facilitator based in Swansea. I'm so excited to talk with her about all of the work she's doing, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hello, Lily. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And we will do a little disclaimer.
Okay. Yes,
You do have a cold.
I am currently sick at the moment, so sorry guys if my voice goes all croaky or if I need to cough halfway through.
No worries. So we actually already met. We did a virtual Zoom interview for my podcast.
Yeah.
And that was all the way back in August 2022,
Oh my
which is
gosh,
crazy.
I know.
Crazy to think about. Crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to actually meet you in person.
I know,
it's great.
me too. I was actually telling my brother, my twin brother, shout out to him. I was telling him, I was like, I'm really, really excited to meet Lily because she's all the way from the US. I was like, all the way from the US. So yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Yeah, what a crazy full circle moment, I feel like.
Exactly.
So I'm so excited to be able to talk with you about the work that we talked about on the podcast episode, of course, just kind of the whole story behind your work, but also what you've been doing since then. And we'll do a little update for the audience. So I would love to first start off by having you tell me about your background and what got you interested in public speaking and podcasting and all this work that you're doing.
Yeah, I always say in regards to like public speaking and stuff, it's something that I just fell into. But I'll start kind of like with my story. Growing up, I moved to Swansea at the age of 2 with my family. And I was brought up in a home where I felt like I could just express myself, be myself. I had a very bubbly character, and I was pretty loud, pretty bold as a young girl. But then when I started to go to school, that kind of, I'd say, fizzled very, very quickly because of things like racism, unfortunately, and then later on Islamophobia. So I started wearing the headscarf at a very, very young age. And for me, sometimes when I went into school, it felt like I had a target on my head, really. And it wasn't really nice. It wasn't nice to go through because at that age, you form your identity based on people's perceptions of you, so your friends, your teachers, and the people around you. So if you're going into school and you feel like you're not really welcomed, you feel like you can't fit in, it starts to have a really negative impact on yourself, and for me it really, really did. So I started to lose like my self-esteem, that confidence that I had. Later on, I actually formed a lot of anxiety and social anxiety as well. So that was a huge part of like my upbringing, and I always talk on that first because for me, even though I had my school, I also, outside of school, my parents took us to Saturday school and even evening school as well, whether that was at the mosque, and unfortunately I would experience the same thing there. So for me, it was like there was kind of like no escape. And I came to a point where I thought that I was just the problem. So everything that I was hearing, the negative things, for me, that became my own inner dialogue, I always say. So those are the things that I would relay to myself. So if you, Lily, came and, I don't know, complimented me and said, oh, Saadia, you have a beautiful smile, I just wouldn't accept that compliment back. Or I'd think that you were making fun of me because of how bad it got, essentially. But somehow, out with all of that, I still had a lot of courage. And I always say, with courage is about, you might have a fear, but you're still able to do what it is that you're fearful of, regardless of that fear. And for me, I had that courage to just get involved in opportunities that my school had. So whether it was sports, whatever it was, and sports was like kind of like a comfort for me. That's where I was able to grow back my confidence again. So I started doing football. So in primary school, I would do football. I'd actually play with my twin brother and the other boys as well on the pitch. It would be me and this other girl as well, and I just enjoy it because I knew my brother was on the pitch. I had that confidence as well. So I started with football, and then I actually joined the schools team. And when I started secondary school, it's the same thing as well. And I dabbled into a lot of other things like netball. I just really loved playing sports, and like I said, it gave me a lot of confidence. And through that, I was able to start volunteering and youth social action. I was able to start volunteering at sports events. But also when I got into college, then I was also able to start to do my own sports sessions for girls that look like myself. And before setting up those sessions, I spoke to the girls. I was like, what is it that stops you from taking part in sports? Because I know that Muslim girls can take part in sports, but there's just something that's holding us back. So what is it? And when I found out what it was that was holding them back, I was able to speak to the college, and they were able to facilitate a space for us to get involved in sports. And that's when I started to really learn how, as a young person, I can take the initiative to do the things that I want to do. I can get my network to support me, whether in college I can find, the people that are going to support me. And that's where my journey really, really began. And I've just taken the same message on. So in terms of like being curious about saying opportunities, having the courage to go for it and saying yes, but also taking the initiative, that's something that I've carried on with me. So even though I don't do as much sports anymore, I've kind of shifted into this space where I'm relaying the same message onto other young people, in the sense that, okay, you can have a fear of doing something like public speaking, but once you do it, you'll realize that, you are capable of doing it. So yeah, I think that's in a nutshell. And there's so many other things that in between I was able to get involved in, but that's how it really, really started in terms of like the foundation. And here I am now, I guess.
Yeah, here you are. Yeah. So tell me more about, you addressed it a little bit, but tell me about the topics that you address when you're speaking to audiences.
Yeah.
Tell me about those. I'm sure that it changes each event, but tell me about some of the topics that you're passionate about speaking about.
So the thing that I'm most passionate about is speaking to young people, even though I do sometimes speak to, people that are more experienced and adults. But I think the thing that gives me the most happiness and joy is when I'm speaking to my peers, essentially, because they can relate to my story. And when they see me, they just see somebody that's maybe like 2 years ahead of them, or whatever it is. And so in regards to, what I speak about when I'm speaking to young people or people my age, it's mainly about like confidence. I'll speak about my story, about how I went from having zero confidence, crippling anxiety, but now being able to speak in front of stages of people. So I talk about confidence. I talk about how do you set goals and actually achieve them? Like, how do you set something in your mind and actually achieve that, bring that into reality as well? I do youth leadership workshops as well. Like, how do you be a youth leader? And that comes from, a lot of that stems from like self-leadership. So to be a great leader, any type of leader, you have to be able to lead yourself first. So that's another thing. That's another workshop. And then the one that I'm most passionate about is how can young people create opportunities for themselves. And now I've actually written a guidebook on that as well, because I was like, I can talk and talk and talk, but it'll be maybe more useful if I just wrote about it. But I have a masterclass that goes alongside that as well. And then the last one is about inequalities as well. I just believe that everybody should be treated fairly, but everybody should be seen as somebody with a story. So I shouldn't look at somebody and just think, okay, because they're dressed a certain type of way, because they look a certain type of way, then they are this, and label them. Instead, I should actually ask the question of, I wonder what Lily's story is, and dive deeper into that, instead of just, looking at somebody and judging them. So I talk about inequality as well. So those are a couple of topics, those are what I talk about.
Those are huge topics.
Yeah.
So you've got more than enough there.
More than enough, yeah.
And now we're adding author to the list of titles as well. That's so exciting.
You could say so,
That's amazing. So tell me about some of your favorite events that you've spoken at. Kind of set the scene for me. Tell me about some of those for you. Maybe some of the biggest ones, some of the most memorable ones for one reason or another. Tell me about those.
Wow. I think, okay, so I'd say in terms of events, I'd say the first Saadia Speaks event always holds a huge memory, even though it's not a big event, but that one was the one that made me realize this is something that I could actually really do. So the first Saadia Speaks event, I was studying at the time, I was in my second year at Swansea Uni, and I joined one of the societies as careers officer, and I was putting on different events, and I was like, hold on a minute, why don't you put on your own event as part of Saadia Speaks? This is something that you're already passionate about. Why don't you take one of your masterclasses and turn it into a workshop and do an amazing celebratory event? So it was in the month of March. We have International Women's Day, and I was like, I'm gonna create this event. And it was, honestly, I speaking about it, I'm just smiling so much because I still remember creating the mood board and just setting the vision of how I wanted it to be. And when I actually came to do the event, it was so much better than that. So we had, the decorations, we had like we had a dessert set up. We were able to, and I say we because I had, my best friend help me, support me, but also we had a couple of student volunteers as well. So I did have a small team help me run that event. But we had about, I think I'd say about 15, students that came, and we talk about, confidence. And I think for me, it's amazing to facilitate a safe space to speak about something like confidence. And also you'll find that people start to speak about, the things that have knocked that confidence, and that can be very, it's a sense of like vulnerability, but that space of people start to support one another, because the way that I run my workshops are through conversations. So I'd always say that one will always hold a huge place. And then in regards to events that I've maybe spoken, in terms of stages that I've taken, I would say MadFest, which is MadFest is like a digital advertising festival, and as part of a charity that I've been involved with, shout out to DigiLearning, I'm actually an ambassador for them, and they were able to take us to MadFest to work on a brief. So we'd work on a brief and then be able to pitch that to brands and to a judge panel, and then they'd actually tell us, if we'd go up against another team of ambassadors. And I was asked to join a panel discussion with some huge figures like June Spurcock, I think I've just butchered his surname, but I think she's like director for something at BBC. I could be wrong, but something like that.
A big shot, yeah.
Big shot, yeah. And just and that was like not long after the pandemic as well. So I still remember having a bit of anxiety, and we were on the stage, and at some point I looked up and this room was just like packed. There must have been about like more than 100 people in there. But we were talking about really, how do you make that space more equal, and actually bring in talent and create a space for talent to feel like, they could actually work in the spaces of like digital and like the marketing spaces as well. That one was a huge one for me, just because of the amount of people that were there. And I have spoken in rooms as well where there's like 300 people, but because it's on Zoom and you don't see those 300 people, you're like, that's
COVID times.
That's like in COVID times. And I think COVID times did give me a lot of confidence, because all the engagements that I did were on Zoom, and I wouldn't have to see the 100 people, the 300 people there. But it gave me a lot of confidence, as the things that I would talk about was mainly to do with the education system, and the inequalities within the education system. As you know, I think I already told you the racism that I had experienced. So I was really, really passionate about that, because at the time we had the Black Lives Matter movement as well. So there was a lot of discussions, and I think that's where I was able to join in some big discussions around that as well.
I think COVID presented so many opportunities for people to get involved, and I think so many different causes, and it was very intersectional as far as so much to get involved in, and people had time to do it, and I think a lot of people really got the bug for making change, and I think it's so amazing too that you were able to kind of practice in that landscape, and now you're able to do it in person. And that's amazing. So tell me more about I think this path of being a motivational speaker is so daunting for so many people to even consider. Even when they hear that, they're like, oh no, public speaking, no. I'm sure that it's been really rewarding for you, though, to do this work. Can you tell me about some of the moments that have stuck with you in your career so far? Are there any people who have maybe come up to you and told you their stories, or what are some of those moments for you that come to mind?
Yeah, I think for me, the moments that always move me the most are, again, because my passion is basically empowering the next generation. So the moments for me that move me the most is when I do have one-to-one conversations with those young people, or a young person after a masterclass will come up to me and ask me about public speaking, and I'm able to share a couple of tips with them about that. But just recently, I was exhibiting at an event here in Cardiff by Child Friendly, and they brought together about like 200 girls from all over Cardiff. And at the event, I was running like this confidence building activity. It was mainly just a worksheet, but again, a space to have a conversation with the young girls that would come to our table. And I kid you not, there was this young girl that kind of reminded me of myself. And she was like, I can tell she was struggling a lot with, a lot of like negative self-talk. And it was really heart-moving for me because on the wake sheet, the first question I asked is, I put a couple of words in a box and I said, just circle 3 things that you think are stopping you from being confident. So it's only 3 things. So one thing is like fear of failure or fear of like being embarrassed or those types of things that I'd put on there. And she was really quick to circle basically everything that I had put, even though I only asked to circle them. And I was like, okay, so I took a deep breath. And I was like, what do you out of all of these things, right? What do you think are what's the one that you think you're struggling with the most right now, right? And we kind of unpacked that. And I really saw myself in here, and it was that negative self-talk of, you can tell that they might have experienced a couple of things and it just knocked them down and they felt like maybe they weren't able to succeed, whether it was in their studies or like they think about a career opportunity, a career path that they can go down, and they're like, yeah, when I look at the requirements, I'm just like, yeah, I won't be able to do that type of thing, right? And so after basically speaking to her and going through certain like confidence building activities, like stop and swap is one of them, where you take a negative thought and you swap it into a positive thought, and also being able to take that worksheet as well, and on the back of it just write a couple of things for her to then take with. And I just saw at the end there was kind of like a smile on her face, and she kind of asked me as well about the guidebook. She was like, am I able to access the guidebook later on? But it's mainly conversations like that where I'm able to, and I know and I trust that would have had an impact on her. And I made sure to leave her like a note. I was like, do you mind if I just write a message which basically summarized everything that I had said to her, but put it in a message where when she does feel down, she could always go back to that message. And I said to her, like, just know that now you do have somebody that's behind you that basically believes in you, and that's all, the mission that I'm on, that's all it's about. Because even though I mentioned to you I had certain people bringing me down, whether it was teachers or whatever, that clearly kind of gave me that message of, because you're from a certain background, I don't think you can achieve a certain grade or wherever it was. But I also had teachers and mentors that were like, Saadia, I believe you can do this. Saadia, you can do this, and provided me with that support. And so I was like, if I can be that for other young people, then imagine where we would be. And so that's why if it's conversations like that, or small things like that, after a workshop, somebody coming up to me, or after a workshop somebody sending me a message and tell me how it's had an impact on them, on their confidence. Maybe there was something that they weren't sure about deciding on, they're very indecisive about a decision, but now they've got the clarity. That's what it's all about. That tiny impact, and as long as I can do that for one person, then that's all that matters to me.
Definitely.
So,
I think that those one-on-one conversations and being able to see that impact, and those stories are going to stick with you forever.
Exactly.
And the individual impact that you're able to make is amazing. So tell me, as you're talking about all of these conversations and how you're facilitating your workshops, do you have any tips for having really impactful conversations? I think that's something that we need now more than ever, and I think it's going to be something that we continue to really, really need, especially as we get more immersed in social media and as we become more interconnected, but also further apart, I think, in some ways. Tell me about your tips for having a really impactful conversation that includes both people. Just give me your overview of how to have a great conversation.
I think the first step is always listening. Like, the first step is you have to always be an open listener, right? So like if me and you are having a conversation, I think it's really important for me to actually be listening to what you're telling me, right? And based off what you're telling me, that conversation can be more deep and more meaningful, because I'm hearing from you, okay, like where you're coming from, and I'm like making sure that I'm very intentional whilst listening to what you're saying, because sometimes what we can do is like we're stuck in our own minds. So you might be speaking to me, but I'm in a
Thinking about the next
I'm in a
thing,
different world thinking about the next thing. So I think that's always the first step, is that like that intentional listening, because when you're able to listen to what somebody's telling you, whether it's a question or whatever it is, then you're able to share something that will actually be useful to them because you were listening the entire time.
Absolutely.
So that's I always say it comes down to listening, and also after that is asking the right questions as well. So when I'm speaking to like young people, it's like firstly having my listening hat on, and then on top of that, trying to ask the right questions, and the questions that will allow me to dig deeper. So if we're talking about, I don't know, something that's stopping you from being confident, I want to be able to get to, as much as I can, I want to be able to get to like the deep-rooted issue, right?
Yeah.
So then I could hopefully be able to steer you in the right direction. And I can only do that by asking questions, but asking open questions, not a question that's going to be with that. If I say, I don't know, Lily, do you like this? And you're just like, yeah, no. We can't go any further, right? But if I ask it, the conversation just ends. But if I ask an open question, though, it means we can just investigate further. So it just comes down to like listening and then asking the right questions. I think I'd say those two things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I also think with asking the right questions, sometimes you'll ask the question that just makes the person light up,
Yeah.
and they just really want to share with you about
Exactly.
that question.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best when you're having a conversation, when you get to see someone just spew information and get really excited about it. You know, I think that's also the best way to get to know people, and like the work that you're doing to understand how you can help them and how you can mentor them. So tell me about what changes that you're hoping to see through the work that you're doing now and maybe the work that you're planning to do in the future. I am going to ask you about future events and things, but just tell me more about your motivations for doing this work and the changes that you hope to see in your community, maybe around the UK, maybe around the world. Tell me about that for you.
The main thing, and the main mission behind Saadia Speaks is I just want to see more young people be able to show up as themselves, because we're living in a world now, especially with social media, but not just, I can't blame everything on social media. There's other things as well, unfortunately, where we are so afraid to show up as ourselves and be vulnerable. And I've been there myself before. It is really, really difficult. And with the recent changes that, I've made to, how I decide to show up as a Muslim woman, like I definitely feel that anxiety sometimes of like walking into a space knowing that you're the only person that's going to look the way that you look, but not letting that stop you from still showing up as who you are. Because I always say that if I'm able to show up as myself and authentically as myself and be vulnerable, then I also give the permission for others to do the same thing as well. And so the world actually needs more of us to show up as ourselves, and we need the confidence to be able to do that. So that's just the whole aim behind what I want to do. And unfortunately, I briefly talked about Islamophobia at the beginning of the show, but it is on the rise because of recent events. And so my fear is that again that also stops young people, especially that are Muslim, from showing up as themselves and like actually embracing their faith, for example. And so it's like, how do you give them the toolkit to still remain resilient and be able to still show up as themselves? Because when you're able to show up as yourself, that's when the right connections come, that's when the right opportunities come, right? So that's my main, that's like my hope and my fear and what I'm trying to tackle from my work.
I think that makes sense. And as far as being authentic, that's also how you get to the point that you want to be at. I mean, of course, I'm sure maybe 10 years ago you never would have seen yourself being at this point. I think this conversation, even like for me too, this is a daunting thing. And I think as soon as you can kind of put, if you can show up in an authentic way and you can be yourself, then you can really achieve anything.
You can achieve, exactly.
That's a great mission. I love it. So tell me about your plans for the future with your speaking career, with your podcast. Tell me about what you've got in store. And then I'll ask you more specifically about some upcoming events that people might be able to follow along with. But tell me about kind of those broader plans for you.
Broader things, So the first thing is the guidebook. I think I mentioned very briefly that one thing that I wish that school would have taught me is how do I actually create opportunities for myself and type of opportunities that are not the traditional opportunities, like a specific job and a specific, career path, but actually take something from nothing and make it into something. How do I do that? And so I've decided to kind of put that in a guidebook. And the reason why I call it a guidebook and not just a normal book is because after each chapter there's actually, like a particular activity that will make you, kind of work through and put what you just read into action.
Okay.
So that's why it's called the guidebook.
Can you tell me one of those? Like, what's the? Give me an example.
This is a good. So, for example, one of the chapters are all about like building a support network and about networking, right? So after I give all the, a couple of tips on how you can, build a supportive network, I talk about actually you need to start with the network that you already have. So you need to acknowledge who's already in your network. And so the activity is actually to break that down. Okay, who is in your support network that can help you with this dream, with this aspiration that you have. And so you have to create some sort of like spider diagram. And you put down, you jot down everybody that's in your supportive network, whether it's like your tutor, because some people don't even think about, for example, you're at university at the moment, right? Some people don't think about how like your university tutors are in your support network. Like if you went to them, when I was at university, I had like mentors, right? If I went to them and I said to them, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm doing, they're able to support me and maybe connect me with their network. They have a network as well. Little things like that, but we're not. It's something so small, but nobody tells you it.
Yeah.
Right? And unless somebody tells you it, you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm studying for 3 years. I've never thought about going up to my tutor, that's, my personal tutor now, and telling them that this is my aspiration, this is my goal, and just having that discussion and seeing where they can support me, because that's their job. That's what they're paid to do,
Yeah.
So that's something there, just acknowledging who is in your support network, because when you have an idea that you want to do, you always think that this idea is bigger than you. So then you're just like, how is this possible? And it's just like, it is possible if you just start with what you have and break it down, and your support network is there to help you with that. So that's one of the activities in the guidebook. And essentially I want to be able to get that guidebook into as many schools, into as many colleges. So the age range is from like 16 to 24.
Okay.
And I think 16 is really when you start to, I know it's before that, but when you start to really think about what career path you want to go down. Do you want to go to university? Those types of things. So with the guidebook, the big ambition for that is to just get that to as many Gen Zs as possible and worldwide, hopefully. Yeah. So that's number one, and that's something that I'm really, really excited about. And then in regards to events, so a lot of the events that I did, and a lot of the work that I did before, I kind of saw it as like a trial, like a test, a test to see, okay, what's going to work, what isn't going to work, right? And so for me, I really want to make sure that I'm able to give back, but within the community here in Wales. So in regards to the events, start to create like spaces, but here within my city, and then Cardiff and surrounding areas. So that's what's next for me, and it starts with building relationships with the people in the community that are already doing that work, and making sure that I'm going to the right places. So obviously the schools are one place, but there's other places like, there are a couple of youth clubs and different spaces that, young people go to, whether it's after school, and making sure that I'm able to connect and take my work there and spread that message there as well. So that's what I'm kind of working on, like behind the scenes at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's also such a good goal with, I think, starting in Swansea and Cardiff and Wales. And I think doing that one-on-one work that's more personal in those communities is so impactful, while at the same time having this book that could have international reach. I think you've got both going. That's amazing. So tell me about some upcoming events or workshops in the near future that you'll be appearing at that people can maybe attend and follow along with.
Upcoming events and workshop. There is one that I'm currently planning, but I can't share any.
Okay, I was going to say, don't tell me anything that you can. Top secret.
But I will be doing like pop-ups.
Okay.
So this is something that I've started to do recently, which is, again, it's all a part of building that relationship piece, which is really, really important to me. But I do exhibitions of events that are already happening, and so actually tomorrow I'll be going back to Swansea University for their their Christmas market,
Okay,
and I'll be
yeah.
selling the guidebook there, and
that's-
that'll kind of be the first time that I will be selling the guidebook in person. You can actually get the guidebook online, and you should be able to get it online tomorrow. So that's when it's officially launching,
Yeah.
basically. But that's something that's very, very close. And then next week as well, I'll be back in Swansea University, but I'll be doing some sort of like careers clinic. Some sort of like careers clinic where you're able to again come in and have like a discussion with myself, and we can break down, whether it's a specific thing that you want to do, how do you do that, how do you make sure that you are utilising the resources that are available to you at the university, because the university has so many resources, and I've said it before on the show already, but the students don't know that. The students don't know that, for example, the studio here, I'm sure they could book out the studio, or they can come and visit the studio and use it if they wanted to do a podcast or something like that. And you will find students that do have those ambitions, but they just don't know how. And I'm like, the resources are there. You just need to access them. So it's really important to me to have those one-to-one discussions, so then I could actually be able to help that young person create like a blueprint of like, this is where you are currently at the moment, but this is everything that you have. And then they can leave feeling like, I do actually have something that I can start with.
Some actual steps to
natural steps,
plan it, and
exactly,
instead of just having the goal that's looming.
Exactly. And so that will be next week as well. I think that's the Tuesday the 5th.
The next Tuesday.
Yeah, the next Tuesday. So if you're a Swansea University student, that's for you as well. And then again, all the other things will be for the new year. So in regards to the events that I'm still currently planning, so I can't share much information.
Top secret.
But I will make sure to keep you updated. Definitely. And then you can share with your listeners.
Absolutely. So I have the signature question for you, and you already answered this on the podcast, but I'll have you answer it again. Lots of young people, especially college students, university students, want to create change and make a difference, but they may not know how to get started with that work. What advice would you have for those people who may be listening?
I'd say to find somebody if it's work that somebody's done before or something similar to that, to try find those people and see if you can get mentored by them, see if you can sit down and have a conversation with them, because it's always so daunting, and I've been in that place, and I'm still in that place where I'm like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I'll give you a top secret, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm on this,
do any of us really?
Literally. I'm just on this mission, and I'm like, the how is not in my hands.
Exactly. You've got like the what. You've got the keep going.
Just literally, right? And so, but one thing that I do try to do is always find the people that are already there and try to connect with them. And you can connect with them because you've got LinkedIn, for example, you've got Instagram, you've got, and sometimes people will send a message to somebody and they're like, oh, they didn't respond. I'm like, okay, did you try their email? Did you also try their Instagram? Did you try everywhere? Did you try, and just, reaching out to them. And then I also get that question of like, how do I reach out to them? And you just simply reach out to them, tell them, that you respect the work that they're doing, and explain to them where you're currently at, but also explain how you want them to help you. Because if you make that ask very, very clear, then they could kind of look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's a 10-minute conversation. That's something that I can do, right? So I always say, like, reach out to find mentors, because they already have the blueprint that you can kind of use. It won't be the same, like your journey is not going to be the same as theirs, but you can definitely take some things from their journey and utilize it so you can start your own journey. So I think that would be like my number one tip, is like find like mentors and people that are already in that space, and really, really utilize the resources that we have, whether it's like, so like podcasts and things like that. So I love listening to podcasts now of like, entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and just listen to their story, because it's really nice to also get the reassurance sometimes that you are on the right track, and you might not be where you want to be right now, but you are on the way there, basically. And when you listen to other people's stories, that's the vibe that I always get, right?
Everyone's been through it.
Everyone's been through it.
Been at this point.
Exactly.
Like just listening to them. I think it's so comforting to hear that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So amazing. I'd say utilizing social media as well for that, because as Gen Z, we do have, the resource of like social media, or like YouTube, of actually being able to actually find out from other people's stories whether they're successful. I always talk about business because that's kind of that's the direction I'm heading. But it is really, really amazing that we get to have that insight, whereas 20 years before we wouldn't have had that insight, right? It would have been just it would have been given to just a select few people, but now we have access to that, so making sure that we use that. So I think that would definitely be the main thing that I'd say. And the second thing I'd say is just start, if you know your why. So if you know why you're doing what you want to do, so this change that you want to make, you need to know why. What is it about that change, right? And why is it so important to you? I think you asked me this question, right, in this podcast today, but if you know why you're doing what you're doing, even in hardship, you're still going to be able to basically carry on. And that's what I found with my own self. This year hasn't been an easy year for me, and I've had a lot happen in my personal life, but because in the back of my mind I know why and the purpose behind Saadia Speaks, I can still kind of keep the boat sailing. Does that make sense? So knowing your why and making that why so strong that you can build a foundation for whatever it is that you want to do and whatever it is that you want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's the motivation that just keeps you going.
You
have to be passionate about, especially if you are going to go on this adventure that you've gone on.
Yes.
With Saadia Speaks, you have to have a reason that you're doing it. Otherwise, I think burnout is so common with things, which is you just got to have something that will get you up in the morning, keep you going. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So what are the best ways for people to follow along with you and the work that you're doing and stay updated on all these events that are coming up and everything?
I mean, they can follow me on everywhere, actually, is Saadia Speaks. So on Instagram, TikTok. My LinkedIn is just Saadia Abubaker. So and how I spell my name is Saadia and Speaks after that. So you can find the podcast everywhere now. You can find it on YouTube, on all the podcasting platforms. And then my LinkedIn, in case anybody is on LinkedIn, is Saadia, and then my surname is Abubaker. And that's the best way to keep in contact, basically.
Yeah, everybody has to go and give the podcast a listen.
Yes.
And, thank you everyone for listening to this. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at bethechangepodcast. And of course, check out Saadia's Instagram, LinkedIn, everything, YouTube. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Agathe Dejude. I'm sure that I messed up her name. She's French and she speaks English as well, and she does her podcast in both languages.
Amazing.
So I'm super excited to talk with her. But she is based in Cardiff, and she's raising awareness about environmental politics. So listen live to that interview at 5 p.m. next week. And until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.
Thank you so
much for coming on.
You did amazing. You're an amazing host.
Oh, thank you. Thank
honestly,
you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.